Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. Today's guest is a good friend of mine. He is a historian, he is a marketing expert, he is a journeyman of sorts. As I've been excited about this for some time. I sense this is going to be quite a big one, quite a long one. Here's my friend George Lupu. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you for having me, Christian. I'm good. I'm good. How are yourself?
Fuck
Yeah.
you. I say that because I'm not okay, and he knows I'm not okay, and he's just already pushing buttons.
Uh, I'm trying to
No,
be the polite guest here.
I'm sorry. I I I am happy to be in your company, George. Of course. That sounds sarcastic. It's not. I've genuinely been excited about this for some time. Me and George had some ideas about what we would do on the show, and we're still going to do that. I'm not going to ruin it or keep that a surprise, but you know, it's been a while toying around. Like you've been saying, like, hey, Christian, when you're going to get me on the show, and I felt bad actually because I have genuinely been very busy lately, and I felt like I'm just like putting you off, kind of thing. And it's like I wanted to get you on sooner, but genuinely, just sometimes how like things just kind of one after another, and you're just searching for that moment where you can properly sit down and do something, and that's how I deal with shit. But with you, I wanted to explore a bit about you and just kind of your mindset and everything before we get into something totally unrelated, because I feel like there's a lot of just fun shit here, like a lot of interesting stuff. I think amongst our friend group, we've got some good storytellers, which sometimes that can go overlooked, I think, as like a skill. Because I mean, for example, there have been people we've met in real life where they'll tell a story, but they can't tell a story very well. So it's kind of like pulling teeth listening to it. And you're polite and you're like, yeah, cool, cool, cool. And you're like, I'm sure it was awesome when it happened, but the storytelling element is not there. Whereas I feel like with you, with Josh, with other friends we have, very well equipped at like painting like a picture. Like you can almost imagine the situation and everything happening. And I've always thought that that's a good mark of a good storyteller. Like before we get into anything else, like I guess, yeah. How did you learn to be a good storyteller? Was there someone that inspired you and you just kind of followed suit, or is it just something you've developed naturally?
I mean, I'd argue that it's something that I developed naturally, because born and raised in Romania, in the Balkans, where storytelling is a big thing. And besides the usual childhood story of, oh, yeah, my grandmother used to read me stories, and my aunt used to read me stories from either traditional fairy tales or like fairy tales from the larger worldwide bank of fairy tales like the Brothers Grimm or Anderson or authors like that. And I always enjoyed storytelling, not necessarily as a way of entertaining, as much as a way of conveying knowledge and past experiences in a way that could be amusing or entertaining or something like that. Because my biggest draw towards storytelling growing up, I was a bit of an unruly child. You couldn't get me to sit still for like half an hour or an hour to tell me a full story tale. And my cousin, who's 17, 18 years my senior, she caught on to that really fast. She's a teacher and she caught on to this really fast. And she figured out, let's teach the child something in an entertaining way in a short form. And that's how I got into fables. I
Ooh.
remember I still probably have it at my mom's. There's this little white book of classic fables. They're translated from the French author Charles Perrault, but Perrault himself got them from the ancient Greek author Aesop. So they're kind of adapted, but they're very short, 2-page, 3-page stories, which are enough for a child that can't bloody sit still. but they um they have a moral, they have a lesson behind it, and they're lighthearted. Nothing meaningful about the meaning of life or something like that. It's like stealing isn't nice. Hard
Really?
work. I mean, hard work pays off.
Huh.
Unless unless you're us.
Bullshit.
Unless you're us. And stuff like that.
Yeah. Sorry, it's just that's such a fucking lie. When you think about like things that you got taught when you were a kid and then the reality of them in real life. And if it sounds like I'm bitter, it's because I am. Um, I used to believe in that, like hard work pays off. And what I've seen in the world is that hard work rarely pays off. Hard work pays off when it's you building something, like let's say you're building a house and you take time, investment, um, you don't cut corners, stuff like that. And then, eventually after say like a year or however long it takes, you build that house and then it was all worth it, right? Maybe a better example would be like, when people take a space to build like a garden or like a just an area of lots of trees and stuff. And it starts from not very much, and people might even be doubtful that you can grow flowers in that place. And then, after quite a lot of time and effort and sacrifice, you do it, you achieve it, and it becomes beautiful. I think in instances like that, hard work certainly does pay off. But when it comes to most everything else in life, it's really hit and miss. Like when I look at my life and everything I've done up to this point, I think I've gotten better. I've improved as a person. But when I look at like the results, the output and stuff, it's like it hasn't really gone anywhere. And that's both frustrating, also um like a head scratcher. Sometimes you obviously it's common to look at the bigger picture in instances like that and be like, where am I going wrong? Is it luck? Is it fate? Is it a curse? Is it did I not work hard enough? Did I not speak to the right people? I mean, it could be a million things. But the point I'm trying to get to is that the world I think that you get taught about as a kid is it paints a very distorted image of what reality is. I understand you don't want to like scare kids shitless with the potentials of life and like what it's really like, but I do remember when I was a kid, certain adults saying things like that when they wanted to get real with you, and you were being like naive about something, and then they'd be like, "Wait until you grow up and enter the real world," and like I used to laugh at that, be like, "Oh yeah, okay," and now I'm like, "Oh man, nah," like they they were probably going through some shit, and they when they said that and they're saying it to a kid and they're trying to kind of not fully tell you how it really is, but be like, hey, listen, enjoy this because it's not gonna last. Like adulthood fucking hard.
Yeah. My answer might surprise you, Christian, but you know who I blame for all of this? I blame the Victorians. And I'll tell you why, tying into the story aspect of things. Um, Fairy tales and stories and fables used to be a lot darker.
Hmm.
Late 18, up until the late 1800s. I was lucky enough. One of the fairy tale collections I have at home is an older version of the Brothers Grimm, not like the sugar-coated Disney version. Oh, yes, the princess marries the prince, and um,
They all live happily ever after.
in a big castle with talking animals, where everybody's friends with everybody else, and it's always sunny outside because it's the details that matter. Anyway, not to go off on a tangent, but still, we as a society, as a species, we used to share cautionary tales with our children that were dark, that were intended to scare them and to prepare them for life and for adulthood. I don't know. Let's take a classic tale, Rapunzel. Okay,
Hmm.
Young princess gets locked in a tower by her mother or her stepmother. Guy discovers the tower she's locked in, fall in love. It's very Romeo and Juliet-y. It ends badly in the Disney fairy tale style of things. Yeah, of course he rescues her, and they fall madly in love, and the evil stepmother pays for what she did, and yada yada yada. In the original version, the um the stepmother catches the guy going up the tower. The guy gets scared, jumps off the window, lands in a rose bush. The rose thorns pierce his eyes.
Jesus.
And basically, the end of the story is the guy wanders for the rest of his life blindly in search of true love. And Rapunzel, I think, either jumps after him but doesn't land in the rose bush. She lands on the ground and breaks her neck and dies. Or her mother seals her inside the tower and she dies from lack of air.
Is the fate of the man a bit of a comment on like Love is Blind, or am I just reading too much into that?
Yeah, it's a bit on Love is Blind. It's a bit on don't invest too much in like your first love or mm, avoid cashing in too much on fleet of the moment things.
Hmm.
But but then yeah, you get the late 1800s, early 1900s, the Victorians. You get Disney. Disney, I think, starts making children's films late 20s, early
Something like that,
30s.
yeah.
Snow White came out in 34 for reference. And it's not the German story. I think, don't quote me on this, but I believe that like, there was a little rumble in the German press when when Disney's Snow White came out because people felt cheated. It's like no, 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 that's not how the story ends. No, 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 no. It's a lot darker. It's a lot grimmer.
They should have made their own version and been like, this is how it really is.
Oh, there are
Oh,
German
really?
animations. I don't know if they were in the 30s because German culture was busy with something else in the 30s.
Really? What were they busy with, Josh? But yeah,
With a certain Austrian painter, which we do not mention in polite company.
and they've just given him praise and maybe admitted him into art college. Who knows how things could have changed? Anyway, um, yeah, I mean, okay, you said I blame the Victorians for this, so let's expand on that a little bit. So obviously, there's a point where we're teaching our kids, hey, this is how fucked up the world is. You don't want this to happen to you. And then suddenly we're like, maybe we shouldn't do that anymore. Let's try making it a bit more softer approach. So something in the ideology changed there. What changed? What was the pivot, if you like?
Well, the modern age isn't my area of specialty, but if I was to warrant a guess, I would say change usually goes from the top down. And at a certain point, the the nobility, the gentry, the upper echelons of society simply got bored and wanted to be further and further away from the common man. That's why you had lavish parties. That's why you had these very intricate receptions and stuff like that, to a point in which they wanted to differentiate themselves from the common people, even by the way they spoke. And manners started being a thing. And the more, I wouldn't say inhuman, but like unnatural your manners were, you're overly polite, overly courteous, overly uh, nice to everybody, the more refined you came across as. And that just kept going. that just kept going. We started avoiding discussing certain topics in public. We started waxing poetic about the weather for an hour instead of discussing, I don't know, finances or family life or other stuff which wasn't rude up until then. We started from the Greeks and Romans that discussed pretty much everybody, because let's not forget the word vulgar comes from Latin vulgus. It means of the people. It was worldly. It wasn't rude, it was simply worldly. And we move 1800 years later to the Victorian age, where it was considered a huge social misstep to reference the fact that the table had the table had legs. It was considered a vile word. I can't remember what word they used instead of saying that the chair or the table has legs.
Or was that, were they taking that as a euphemism for meaning like,
No,
like,
the word itself, the word leg, was seen as a bit rambunctious, a bit sexual, a bit
interesting.
cheeky. You,
I
you wouldn't say
reckon
leg, and
I reckon in that time as well, because it's interesting. I'll just say now, like I'm not a fan of how like in your face society is when it comes to sex and talking about sex and stuff. Like I'm all for like free speech and people expressing themselves, but I just don't want to see it like and hear it constantly. You know what I'm saying? Like when you see it in like music videos on the television, sometimes in the street. I've seen people by walking around fucking Manchester and they're like naked. I'm like, how are you not arrested? Because it is a crime here in the UK, by the way. But you know, but back then, the Victorian age, as you said, they were very. They took it very seriously. Like you said, it was a social faux pas. It was considered vulgar. It was considered, many things. But then I do wonder, like, did that lead to like a lot of like sexual repression, and therefore like um it needed a release kind of like years and years later, and it was only a matter of time kind of thing, because you can't keep a lid on things like that. But at the same time, like the nature of people changed. Like, so your common person would have seen that as vulgar, and yeah, sure, they were taught that, they grew up in that era and stuff. But then we know of the Victorian age that like things like prostitutes were a thing, and quite, it was quite a big thing. I mean, obviously, famously Jack the Ripper and like what was going on in Whitechapel at the time and stuff. No, I believe all of those women were prostitutes. If I remember correctly.
yeah, they were.
Um, what say you on that? Like how we got to this point where like we got OnlyFans models fighting each other and sleeping with 1,000 guys for content. Like it's gone crazy, hasn't it? Like we've gone from like one extreme to another. How have we got there?
Well, the thing is, if you look throughout history at, let's say, humanity's relationship with sex,
Hmm.
with like the carnal aspects of life, every society found its release valve, its outlet. So the higher ups were very prudish, famously, across pretty much every age and every culture. The common man had no such issues. And to circle back to the Victorians, yes, you had the upper echelons, the MPs, and the upper gentry that were very delicate, very refined, very ethereal in their way of speech and acting. And in the meantime, yeah, you had places like Whitechapel that had prostitutes. You had, and the interesting part is you even had nobles and people with higher educations that were interested in this. I don't know if you know, but in the late 1800s, I forgot what the term was, but there were sort of like review books for prostitutes. London and Edinburgh famously had them.
What, like a guidebook? Like, oh, if
Eh,
you go to this area, like the
yeah.
service and the ladies are of this.
Yeah, and the thing is, they
Jesus,
describe very explicit sexual acts by using very elaborate metaphors.
that's crazy.
Uh, uh, I think I'm quoting from memory here, but I think something along the lines of, if you go down Baker Street around Thursday evenings, you will find Miss Sarah Baker, and she's very generous with younger men, and her rhetorical talents uh, leave little to be desired. Of course,
That's
they wasn't saying she was a good speaker.
what's that review website? Not Trustpilot, the other one, the main one. Like when you know you're reviewing like a hotel or some shit.
Uh, can't remember. Booking, not booking.
Yeah, maybe Booking. I don't know. It's like review. That blows my mind. Uh,
Yeah, six has been with us. There's it's two of the inevitable factors of human life, sex and death. That's why every culture across the world has a lot of taboos regarding it, but an intrinsic necessity to address those things, no matter how inhuman, how otherworldly, like a small part of society wants to be. The common man doesn't have such issues. Okay, the common man has a wife. He's got his field to
TripAdvisor,
plow.
sorry, TripAdvisor. It's TripAdvisor for prostitutes.
Pretty much. And basically, yeah, we're obsessed with it. Like, you have one part of society who's very concerned about like very spiritual or very high matters, and considers these things mundane and rude and something you don't talk about. The common man doesn't have such concerns. The common man needs to eat, needs to have children, needs to work. Sorted.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I find really interesting is, especially like the Victorian age, is that people the class divide was always in, and there was always this want to rise up out of that class and you know have wealth, have a profession, be respected. Like it was all considered very important as part of society. And I think to a certain extent that still exists in society, but it's radically different now. Because there's different levels to it. So like I guess the standard now is like if you've got a car or a few cars, a house, you know, you live in a nice neighborhood, you've got a decent, well-paying job, you're considered like middle class, I suppose. But then obviously upper class is like super, super rich. Like it could be nobility, it could be where you've just kind of transcended middle class now and you're like fraternizing with the billionaires or whatever. Point is, it's different. You know, the upper echelons of society, different types of parties, different types of conversations, etc. But the way that we express wealth and riches these days is like totally different. Because like back then, it would have just been like you know land, profession, wealth, and you know maybe clothes is like the sign of such things. You know, like oh, I've got this fancy car. Oh, I've you know my personal guard, blah blah blah. You know, I mean, I'm sure there were plenty of other like ways of expressing how rich you were, but like that's just off the top of my head. But like these days, I mean, you see people spend like tens of thousands of pounds on like Gucci tracksuits that look like shit, but because it says Gucci on it, some people will respect that. A large majority of people will respect that. Whereas like people like myself, like I look at that as like a complete insane waste of money. And even if I was rich, I still wouldn't do that. Like I don't get it. I don't judge other people for doing it because I'm like, it's your life, do what you want. But I just find that crazy personally. And I find it interesting like how much we've evolved but also devolved, I feel. Um because I feel like if nothing else, like it always makes sense to have some degree of wealth, like have some land, have something that your future generations could benefit from. Um, do more things for your community. As much as there are charities out there and people helping and stuff, and that sense of community, like a lot of that is lost. And I feel like maybe capitalism is to blame. I don't know. I don't want to get too hyper political on, but like it does kind of sometimes feel very like dog eat dog kind of thing. And that there's less of that trying to help each other out aspect. Whereas the impression I get in like times gone by, like taking the Victorian age as an example, is if you were working class, like we're all in it together kind of thing, like it's us versus them kind of mentality, you know?
Uh, I respectfully disagree with you, Christian,
Go for it.
because uh, first of all, how I see things, people say, "Oh, history repeats itself." I like to say history doesn't repeat itself, but it has a tendency to rhyme because we have the same morals, the same tendencies.
Do
The
we?
mediums change. You said, "Oh, yeah, okay, you were rich in the Middle Ages. You went to market or to church because that was the main social hub, dressed lavishly or doing something absurd. For example, there was a fashion trend in the German states in the 1500s of wearing an extra sleeve to your jacket that you'd tear artistically to show the common man that you had enough money to not only buy the good cloth, but also waste a bit of it.
That's like the old equivalent of just burning like $20 bills or some shit. Same principle.
It's like buying a 1 grand Balenciaga t-shirt and poking holes in it just because you can waste it. It's the same thing. I'm willing to put money down on the fact that if the Byzantine Empire would have still been a thing right now, the Byzantine Emperor would do lives on Instagram, just juggling his cards or something, or just juggling the money. Opulence has been a thing. We need to show our wealth. We like to brag about our wealth. We're braggarts as a species.
There's a concept idea. Famous historical people using modern technology. Like imagine we brought up our favorite Australian painter earlier. Imagine if he'd have had like TikTok or I don't know YouTube and was able to broadcast using something. You know what I mean? Like how interesting and different history would have been with technology being more readily available in earlier ages. It's just kind of fascinating how it might have played out, so to speak. You know?
But society always finds a way. Society
Sure.
always develops uh, ways of adapting the technology it has to its needs or finding new and innovative ways of being petty. You say, oh, if that certain painter who would not be named would have had like TikTok or YouTube, he would have made it big. He was
What?
broadcasted on the radio. He was broadcasted in other countries as well. I don't believe he was ever like properly dubbed, but his speeches were fairly well known even outside of Germany. And
Crazy. What do you think they would have reached England? Would we have heard that in England or
I'm not sure about England. I know some of his speeches were broadcasted in the States on public radio.
that's pretty crazy.
And even before that, we don't change our habits. We change the mediums we use to nurture those habits.
Well, I respectfully disagree with you. um, I mean, well, we do change our habits, but it's in accordance with like what is readily available in society and what society pushes us to be. Like, for example, when you and I were kids, there was a drive to be better and to improve yourself and to work hard and study, and like that was really hammered home, right? Whereas now, you can be lazy as fuck and never study and never apply yourself and still get somewhere in life. I see it all the time. I'm baffled sometimes at how much like younger people just don't know things like basic things that like you and I just sort of take for granted as knowledge, you know? But then it kind of dawned on me that they've grown up in an age where, they don't even have to apply themselves and search for the answer. They can just Google that shit and just be like, oh, there's the answer. And not think about, okay, but why is that the answer? What's the story behind that? Blah, 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 you know? I mean, something I learned at school was critical analysis or critical thinking. And I understood that a lot of schools didn't teach that in England. Like only certain schools taught it, and we were quite lucky because we weren't like a posh school or anything. It was a good state school. It was a former grammar school, so it had like hangover from that. Um, but it was something that was a skill that was taken for granted, and not everyone has the ability to do that. And that's something I'm very grateful for is like to just not just take information and just accept it on face value, but question things. Why is, especially in this day and age, with the amount of information we're given and people just don't question it at all. They don't question the source. They just believe it straight away. It's like you have to question everything. That was me since day one, and I knew it used to piss off my teachers. Like, stop asking so many questions, stop doing it. But thank God I did, for various reasons. But like, imagine in this day and age not asking questions, just accepting everything and believing everything. I mean, there's more bullshit in the world now than there probably ever has been, you know?
Yeah, I count myself lucky in this regards due to a couple of teachers, mainly my history teachers, which would explain why I went on and tried to pursue a career in this field. Because most of my history teachers were um, basically encouraged us to prove them wrong. It's like, okay, if you have your arguments, if you have your facts, I am willing to help you to prove me wrong. I'll give you the methods, the methodology of how to make a historical inquiry. I'll give you some authors' names if you want to read. It was a bit of a trick to get us to read more, to discover things about, I don't know, certain period or a certain historical figure. And yeah, it happened in other subjects as well. We had when I was in high school, we had a very good English teacher that said, "Okay, we're teaching Shakespeare. Yeah, okay, let's delve into his life a bit. Let's see how London was at the end of the 1500s when Shakespeare used to hang out, probably around the same places you used to hang out as a kid." um, but yeah, no, I think the general fright of, oh, information's way too easily available. Everybody's gonna be smart. Everybody's gonna have access to every information. This started from the Greeks, my friend. The Greeks were scared of the fact that if we were to write down wisdom, information, what have you, people would dumb themselves down. I can't remember which philosopher was sternly against writing things down. It's like, if you don't remember all those legends, excuse me, if you don't remember all those stories, all those principles, if you don't train your brain and train your memory, how will you ever be a wise man? Why
I
would
think
you
I
ever
think
write
there's some
anything
truth
down?
in that. Yeah. I think that maybe not completely. I think it is important to document history and facts and share it with other people, but there is definitely a problem with people not exercising their minds. I mean, people say that like it helps with things like dementia and keeping the mind active in general, because if you don't do it, your mind deteriorates. And it was one of the reasons why I do this show is because it forces me to sit down and research a person and sometimes do like a lot of reading into something so I can understand what the fuck to ask. And then, of course, I sit and I listen, and that's a form of learning. Like, it's amazing how, like, okay, case in point, last night, we were both really, really tired, and we were having a really interesting conversation about music, but my mind just was not fully ready to receive it. And I remember thinking, like, I wish this was another day when I had more energy because I could really just sit and absorb this for hours. There's been times when we've been on nights out, and I've noticed that we're like we've got a pretty deep conversation going, and it's interesting stuff. But the people there, they just want to chat about silly shit, which is fine. Like I think that you should have different types of conversations. You can't just be deep and heavy 24/7 because that's tiring. But you can't also be superficial and just silly shit all the time either. Like it's you got to find the balance. But if you are a person that just only talks silly shit and is kind of almost like afraid of the deeper stuff, because that's the impression I get sometimes is we might be having a conversation. I can think of times actually when we have been having deeper conversations, and then there's been like a light mockery of that, like, oh well, why are you talking about that? Like it's so boring, or it's too much, and it's like because this is interesting. This is why I come out for conversations like this. Um, don't want to just be talking superficial stuff.
Yeah, I do believe there's a time and a place for certain conversations, but
Yes, of course.
sometimes they just happen naturally.
Yeah, but like, okay, um, part of the reason I come out and hang out with my friends is like some of it's nostalgia. You're a similar age, you can trade stories. Some of it's, oh, what's happened since the last time I saw you? Oh, wow, that's crazy, and whatever, right? Like you said, things happen naturally. Like you might just be like, oh, hey, this happened, so like check this out, right? Or as you say, like the conversation happens naturally, and then you just kind of get onto a tangent and you go from there and it becomes a really interesting night. But I've just noticed over the years that like sometimes there are people that are almost afraid of that or not receptive to that. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. And they actively reject it. So they'll get annoyed by you doing that. And I just find that really, really bizarre, to be honest.
We do have a bad habit of bringing up very deep and meaningful conversations on Fridays or Saturdays when people come down to the pub after a week's worth of work. They're tired. They just want to relax, and we discussed, I don't know, Roman philosophy or politics or stuff like that, and people aren't just don't have the brain power to process it anymore. Some people do, some people don't. Some people enjoy it, some people don't. Horses for courses, you know?
I think, I mean, I get it. I am the same. Like I like a bit of both. But you can't get annoyed at me if we're sitting there and we're having a conversation. If I'm forcing you to listen, all right, fair enough, that's too much. But if you're just there and you're not interested, talk to someone else. Don't listen. There's been times when you've been talking about something and I don't have the energy, so I just shoot the shit with Josh or something, and I don't feel bad about it because I know that it's better I do that and not invest myself than sit there and kind of like half-ass listen and not really be invested. Because I think that's worse. I think that's more rude when people do that. Um, it's just a bit like frustrating, really. But anyway, speaking of stories, please tell your airport stories on the show.
Ah, yeah. I'm guessing there's that particular story that you,
Yes,
you
that's
wanted.
that story because it's amazing.
Yeah, I'm thinking of how to tie it in to make it fun, but again, see, context, because we were talking about like context. Yeah, so the infamous story. Uh, I'm an expat in the UK. For those listening that aren't aware of this, and I sometimes am forced to travel back to my home country, and probably if not the last time I've been there, but like 2 or 3 times ago, I had to travel Bucharest to Munich, Munich to Manchester. And usually that's a day-long trip because you have some layovers, you need to get to the airport 3 hours earlier, waste time. If it were up to the airport, waste some money, hop on a plane, fly to a different country, waste about an hour or two there, hop on another plane, then get home. So you leave home at like 10 in the morning and you get home at like midnight. Um, Not a nice experience, won't recommend. Anyway, so I fly into Munich. Everything normal. Just I usually tend to travel very light because I'm lazy. And I hop on the plane from Munich to Manchester. And actually, no, it was Liverpool, not Manchester. Uh, Hop on the train to Liverpool. I land and we go through customs and just wait in line. And usually, if I see big groups like families or tourists or like larger groups, I tend to just let them go before me just so they can handle formalities and stuff like that. And we just set myself probably last or second to last in the queue. Yeah. You know, the procedure. Yeah, can I see your papers? Yeah. Anyway, I reached the customs booth. And there's this customs officer, tall guy, really formal, bald head in his 50s, crisp uniform, pressed shirt, dressed to the nines as much as a customs officer can. And this was probably, I don't know, half, sorry, half midnight, 1 a.m., something like that. It's like, straightens his back. It's like, may I see your travel documents, sir? Like, yeah, sure. Hand in my passport, hand in my ID, hand in my ticket. You're only supposed to hand in your passport, by the way. But I hand him everything because I had all of them in my breast pocket and just like opens my passport, says, do you have any additional documentation? Like, give him my Romanian national ID card. Looks at it. Can't make a word out of it, even though it's translated in English, but people don't know where to look, so they don't figure it out. So he probably just like read 2 or 3 things, figured out that the information matches with the passport, and just set it aside and said, have you got any British documentation? Yeah, sure. Just open my wallet, pull out my learner's permit, hand it to him. Looks at the permit, says, okay, so you live here, okay, fine. Um, yeah, everything seems to be in order. And I ask him, okay, may I leave? I said, I'm sorry. I'm afraid I can't let you do that. That is the last thing you want to hear at midnight in an airport after 9+ hours of travel. You reach the closest point. You're just like, okay, I'm passing through the customs, hopping in an Uber, getting home, sleeping. It's like, no, I'm sorry, can't do that, sir. Like, okay, is there something wrong? Like, why can't I go home? And he just like slumps his shoulders and turns into the lad. Be like, sorry, mate. Your face is asking for a pint. There's a pub down the road. Go get yourself a pint and then go home and sleep. And just hands me my documents. He was laughing. He was laughing. It was a good chuckle, but the initial reaction, because he was, like I said, straight back, very formal, very authoritative. last thing I wanted to hear that night. Had a good laugh about it. Had a good laugh with my roommate when we came home. I rang me mom. Had a good laugh with her about it as well. But yeah, it was one of the many travel stories that it was bad in the moment, funny 5 minutes after.
That's a good story, but it's not the one I'm thinking of. Because you've had more than one. How do I put it? Interaction with airport security guards. But this one wasn't about you specifically, but you were there to witness the entire hilarity unfold. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay. So a different travel scenario. Same route, Bucharest to Munich, Munich to Manchester. Yeah, so hop on a plane. And usually I don't concern myself with the first leg of the journey. Like I know Bucharest airport fairly well. I go there in time. I go to the smoke, grab myself a coke, go to the smokers lounge. Anyway, hop on the plane. I fly to Munich. And because Romania wasn't in Schengen back then, we needed to pass through customs again in Germany from a non-Schengen country to a Schengen country. Anyway, the usual. Get in the queue, take your belt off, take your watch off, put everything in the tray. Uh, uh, two or three uh, people ahead of me. There were two lads, and I mean lads, capital L, and not as a compliment. And
British
they
lads. Yeah.
proper lads,
Proper lad.
proper mad lads, I dare say. And they were probably enjoying the local brews a bit too much for Thursday at noon. And due to the fact that there were a lot of people, lots of flights, and the certain connecting flights were fairly close together. The security was, they were probably a bit understaffed that day. And they said, we are willing to delay departures until we finish. And we would have made the flight. But the lads decide to be lads.
Mm.
Oi, could we move on, lad? Move on. Come on, come on. We need to catch the game. We need to catch the footy. The German border police just straight faced. Oh, come on. I don't know how comfortable you are with me, like quoting them word for word.
Let's try and clean it up a little bit.
Oi, you idiots. You can't handle this. It's simple. Come on, we're missing the footy. Germans was like, nope. Starts calling them the whole list of names you could call someone, and I have to hand it to those. And the interesting part was that the border police, the officers that were there, were fairly young, mid-20s, early 30s, probably. Statues. Until he uses a certain term that begins with an N and has four letters, which is something you should never call a German, especially in Germany, especially a border officer. The guy keeps ranting. His mate even just like sobered up a little. It's like, mate, yeah, just try and calm down. Come on, it's fine. Guy wasn't having it. 3 seconds after that, two other officers show up with machine guns, with German shepherds. And the last thing the guy hears before his breath catches is he sang a different tune right after that. He just like turns almost kneels. He was pretty drunk at that point. He was like, oh no, sorry, come on, no, I was joking, come on, I just want to go and watch the footy. Yeah, they weren't having it. Just like pick them up, drag them off. We lost up our plane because of that guy.
Ah,
And it's really interesting because, again, his mate, who got off scot-free because he knew when to keep his mouth shut, it's like rushes to the connecting flight, which was my flight, decides to argue with the flight attendant that was working the booth. Uh, yeah, and she was this fairly young, probably early in her career, fairly shy. She was trying to be polite, had a very good level of English. Um, she was like, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm trying to." Started calling her names. Got politely ushered out of the airport. And I was like, okay, I lost my flight. I'm in Germany. I don't speak any. Like the entire extent of my German is I can fairly accurately say sorry. I don't speak German.
yeah,
And I sat down. I rang my mom. I tell her, okay, I missed my flight. I ring my roommate who was supposed to pick me up, and I tell him, mate, yeah, I missed my flight. I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know when I'm gonna get there. I'll let you know. So she's like, yeah, okay. He had like 2 or 3 hours before it takes like 40 minutes to get from mine to the airport. So he was in no rush. He's like, I didn't even leave home. It's fine. Just keep me in the loop. Sat down, took a breather, went to the smoking lounge, smoked a cig, came back, put my human face on. That girl at the booth, that the flight attendant, she was crying. She was not like ugly crying, but like sobbing. It was like,
wow. So he said some like really horrible shit then.
yeah, and she wasn't used to it. Like
Oh, I see. Yeah.
uh,
Okay.
people, like German people, tend to be a lot more polite, and you don't cause a scene in an airport
Mm.
because the nice people with the machine guns come and take you for a walk.
Wonder what happened to that guy.
It's probably suspended or probably put in something like a drunk tank or something, or maybe have a fine or something.
Mm.
I don't know what the penalties are, but he
Anyway.
definitely wasn't on any of the flights I've seen leave. So probably like cool them off for an hour or two. Anyway, so I go to this girl. She looks up at me, starts ranting something in German, and I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like my heart goes out to you. I don't speak a word of German. Just started chuckling and tells me, I'm sorry, that you probably missed your flight, and like, and I said, yeah, I'm sorry, I know, and please tell me if this isn't possible, but I would like, if possible, to find a way to get back to the UK. I didn't say Manchester, I said to the UK today. Is there something? If you can, please don't feel pressured. I was trying to like get what I want, but also like comfort her and be nice. And she's like, I'm sorry, it's nothing I can't do. So it's no more flights to England from Munich today.
Oh
But I'll
shit.
try and help you out. Like, okay. Just went to the uh, waiting area that was right next to the booth, sat down, put my bag down. I was like, okay, now we breathe. We think through it. I have friends in Germany, none of them in Munich. So it's like, okay, worst case scenario, I hop on a train to the next largest town where I actually know someone, ask them to pick me up at the station. I crash at theirs for a day or two and then just find the next flight to Manchester. I was like, okay, let's cool off. Got myself a nice bottle of pop, had a little sip. 5, maybe 6 minutes later, she comes to me and says, sir, yeah, could you come here? Yeah, come, hand in my ticket. Like, there are no flights from Munich to Manchester today. There's a flight from Frankfurt. Like, okay. Munich and Frankfurt are not within travel distance. And she's
Mm.
like, uh, I could get you on a connecting flight from here to Frankfurt in 30 minutes and then get you on a plane from Frankfurt to Manchester. And you'd be home I was supposed to get to the UK at 6:30. I ended up getting to the UK at 7:30.
Not bad.
It's like I was an hour late. And yeah, she
Oh,
she just like gives it, and I was like, okay, is there a surcharge? Is there anything else? No, 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 no. Everything is covered. But there's only one seat. And said, I'm a lone traveler. I only have carry-on baggage. There's no fuss, no nothing. Just like pop my bag on my back. That's it. So I head like 3 gates away to the next terminal. If you don't speak German, I can not recommend the Munich to Frankfurt flight. I had to remind the flight attendants probably like 5 times in a 40-minute flight that I don't speak a word of German and I'm not taking the piss. Because I don't stand out among a crowd of like regular Germans. I don't stand out at all. So anyway, they were very nice. They were everything. I fly back to Frankfurt. So I rush to the flight to Frankfurt. I get into the flight. I fly from Munich to Frankfurt. From Frankfurt, I ring my roommate and I said, mate, yeah, I'm coming home except an hour later. And she's like, okay, fine. Um, if and when you ever meet my roommate, you'll see the guy is not bothered by anything. It's like, ah, okay, fine. Just leave home an hour later. Hop on the hop on the plane to Frankfurt, get to Frankfurt, hop on the plane from Frankfurt to Manchester. And I managed to do this because uncharacteristically for the people that know me, I'm fairly short-tempered. I speak my mind. I'm not exactly the nicest and the most polite person, but in that situation and in a few situations in my life, being nice and patient and polite actually paid off.
and that's the end of the story, yeah.
That's pretty much the end of the story. Yeah,
I
I
thought
landed in.
I felt like there was more though with the guards interaction. I seem to recall you talking about having a long conversation with them and that being like almost the polar opposite of the conversation they had with the ignorant lads. Did I get that wrong? Or was that a different
Yeah, no,
story?
you got that wrong. No, I didn't speak with the guards because they're very duty focused,
Oh.
especially if there's like a situation. They focus all their attention on de-escalating.
So there's a third story then that you told me about airports and an interaction with a security guard.
Can't recall.
I'm sure of it. Like a really serious security guard, but you were really respectful and it
I can't
worked out.
recall. I can't
It was
recall very
definitely in
well.
Germany. I know that much.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. I am very well traveled across two very specific German airports. Not Germany, not the towns themselves. Like I have no idea how Munich looks like. I know the layout of Munich airport like the back of my hand. I never set foot out of it.
Let's talk about Manchester. So, how long have you been in Manchester for?
So, well, I think it's been 6 years now, maybe a bit more.
Ah,
So I came to the UK January of 2018.
okay.
So seven, almost no, actually 7 years now. Yeah.
What's the craziest shit you've ever seen in Manchester?
Craziest shit.
Because a lot of crazy shit happens here.
There's a lot of crazy shit. Like if you go down the street like Oxford Street or like Great Anchor's at 1 a.m. on a Friday, you see crazy shit every 10 feet. Ah, I need to think about this for a second. Uh, it's probably not crazy in a bad way, crazy in an interesting way. Probably the first time I went to Village. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before because most of my travels didn't focus on like urban areas and like areas with like modern culture. So for me, the gay village in Manchester was a very interesting experience, completely against the stereotypes I was brought up with. Found nice people there, accommodating. Yeah, sometimes like yeah, you have the occasional hype person in front of a club that, oh, come on in, we'll give you a free shot or something. But they're never pushy, they're never rude. You know, they're a little salesy because that's the job. But they're never like they don't grab your hand or do something like stuff like that. But probably at the village.
It's a cool spot. We've been there many times, had some really good nights. Often it's the place to go when everything else is shut 'cause they're always open. So it's pretty cool. And there's some like good places to hang out, some good food places as well. Like it's good location. It's interesting for me as well because I grew up in London. So my only point of comparison, I suppose, would be Soho, and I never really thought much of Soho. Soho, by comparison, just doesn't have the same feel. It just feels very, especially now, it's very built up and kind of like hipstery, if that's still a thing, which is fine, but it's just not what I thought it would be, you know. Whereas a gay village, as the name suggests, is kind of like this little village. It's kind of like a little pocket in the city where I don't think anything else really resembles that in the same way. And the clubs kind of work a little bit differently, which I find interesting. Um, but yeah, it's cool. It's a cool little spot. What's the craziest interaction you've ever had in Manchester?
You mean besides our usual pub nights? Crazy.
I just know that you've had some people like I don't know, say some crazy shit to you, and maybe you struggled to find a way to find logic in what they were saying. Let's put it that way.
Okay. If I'm thinking crazy interaction, it wasn't a bad interaction. It was just completely unexpected. So it was probably during my first month after I moved to Manchester. I used to live when I moved to Manchester. I used to live in a hotel uh, on Great Anchor Street. And if you go down Great Anchor Street, I don't think it's open anymore. There used to be this like little chicken shop called Chili's.
Mm.
And the nice part about it, because I was with my actual like now roommate, back then we weren't roommates. 1, 2 a.m. We got the munchies. He was just finished with his work. I had pretty much nothing to do at that point. I was like, well, mate, yeah, trying to grab some good food. Cheap, nice, fresh. Yeah, sure. So he comes with his van. Keep in mind, this was like January-ish. He had this big white van. Um, they just get dressed up, go down, get in his van. We drive, and he parks his van in one of the back alleys. Yeah, we go to that chip shop. We get no food, everything nice, neat little bags. It's like let's eat in the car because the place was packed, and this was like I don't know 2 a.m. on a Wednesday. The place was packed. It is or it was fairly small. They only have like 2 or 3 tables. It was packed because they used to do this really nice thing. They didn't have pre-made wraps or buns. They just had this blob of dough. And they made the wraps or the buns from the same bloody dough, but they did it then and there. That's why you had to wait like 5-10 minutes for your food. Amazing. Anyway, we get our food. Starts to drizzle because this is Manchester. We get our food, get in the car, just like put our boxes on our laps in this little tight alley. And I only got to put the food on my lap, look down at it, look back up, and see 2 police vans just like boxing us in. 2 police vans in the front, 2 in the back. And I was like, I look at my roommate and say, mate, yeah, why are there 4 police vans boxing us in?
Immigration.
And, I still counted as a tourist. I was in my first month. Legally, I still counted as a tourist.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. And I look at my roommate and said, mate, yeah, I'm the driver. I've been here longer. Let me handle this. Like, okay. A couple of seconds later, two vans in front just like part ways. There's a police car this time, just like drives up to the to our van. This young police officer, probably our age, steps out. My roommate just like rolls down the window. Guy, very official again. You're right, lads. Yeah. In the meantime, they probably, I don't know, checked his reg or scanned the car, or did something. And yeah. There's been a robbery reported here.
Ah.
Someone stole a safe.
Oh shit.
Have you seen anything? To a point in which our tired brains at that point just like picked up our takeaway boxes and be like, it's like, no, sorry, just pop down. And the guy just goes from professional to like lad in like 5 seconds flat and be like, oh, you got chilies? Yeah, the food's really good. What'd you get? It's like we just like throw random banter with him, like I don't know, probably a minute or 2 minutes. Just be like, okay, okay, lads, yeah. You know the number of the Greater Manchester Police? Yeah, yeah, okay. If you spot anything out of the ordinary, give us a ring. Like, yeah, sure. Like, okay, take care, lads. Sorry to bother you while you're eating. Goes back in the car drives away. In my area of the world, when the police is around, it's a good idea to get out. So we just like boxed our food. We barely had a bite each. Just like box up our food. It was like, okay, I don't know, just drive away, park somewhere else. We'll eat in a different parking lot. We just pack our food. And he drives away. And the thing that scares me was, keep in mind, one police car, four police vans. We left in probably, I don't know, under a minute from there. Nothing. We didn't see any police from, I don't know, probably Great Anchorage up until, I don't know, the far end of Deansgate. But yeah, probably that's the funniest interaction because it looked like an action movie. Looked like an action movie. They didn't search the van. They didn't ideas. They didn't anything. And my roommate was like, mate, yeah, you do realize they had four vans. One of them definitely had a scanner. They scanned our reg. We were well lit. They scanned our faces. They know who we are. They know who the car is. And they probably have a thermal camera to detect what's in the van. And the van was empty. It was completely empty. So I'm guessing, I don't know. I'm not good with physics, but I'm guessing if there was a safe there, it might have been warmer than the rest of the van or something. So it would have stood up in a thermal scan.
Welcome to the UK, right? Fucking hell. It's brutal. Yeah, I've always had a kind of a love-hate relationship with the police because it really, I think people often forget that they are people and that every cop is going to be different. So some cops are just like normal people, great people. They're just doing their job, and you can appeal to that, and they'll be lovely and really supportive and helpful. Other times, they're complete fucking jobs worth assholes who just seem to abuse their power. It kind of reminds me of the is it the Milgram study or what's the one where it's like prison guards?
Mhm. I know the one you're talking about. I can't remember the name to save my life.
I should know this. They used to bang on about this in GCSE psychology. Fuck. Zimbardo, something like that. Basically, it was a very famous study in the 1970s, I believe, in America, where they took a bunch of people, normal people, and they assigned them roles. So some people were prisoners, some people were prison guards. And obviously, the prisoners would be in prison cells. And everyone kind of played into it initially, and there was a bit of like silliness, banter, obviously, of the situation. But after a while, as time passed, it did begin to get a bit like real. And the people playing the prison guards, in some instances became abusive of power and actually started abusing that. And some of the prisoners fell in line and really towed the line and were fearful of the prison guards. And I guess the whole point, the takeaway from that experiment was that, if you assign that power, if you put people in that position, even if they know it's an experiment, it can go to people's heads and it can change their behavior. And hence, I think to some extent, the classic saying of absolute power corrupts absolutely. Like it's inevitable. I've noticed it as a psychological thing sometimes when it's like the battle of the ego. Like I've had people give me compliments before, sometimes a lot in a quick space of time, and it feels nice to receive a compliment. Maybe even on some level seductive. Like you start to like really enjoy it. It's like, and but here's the thing: like I've always kind of brought myself back to earth and been like, yeah, well, that's nice to hear, but it's time to get back to reality now and just be normal. You know. But I can see how people with big egos fall into that trap and go down that line. Do you know what I mean? They kind of like fall into that, and that becomes like a drug almost. They just want more and more and more of that. You see it with like major celebrities sometimes, like people at the very top of their field who've done everything. They don't need to prove anything to anyone, but they're obsessed with staying in the spotlight. I just find that particularly fascinating from a psychological perspective. I think it's particularly interesting now in today's society how a lot more people are trying to become famous or well known or just getting attention online. And I worry sometimes that's quite damaging. But funnily enough, the more and more I learn, the more and more I grow, the more and more I am less enthusiastic about the prospect of becoming known and famous because it just sounds awful. To be honest, like I want it. I don't. I remember saying this to my girlfriend once, and she was like, "Well, that's not the way the world works." I was like, "My perfect scenario: I go on stage or I do my thing. Everyone in the moment pays attention, and then as soon as I'm done, no one cares." Like, that would be perfect, but that's not how it works. Um,
Yeah, it's a matter of there's another saying, I can't remember whose, but there's a saying that says if you want to find out the person's character, hand them power. I think
Interesting.
I think and in this context power probably refers to authority over other people. And this ties into what we were talking about down at the pub yesterday. Rock stars. Some
Yeah.
are genuinely nice people no matter how big they make it, how common household names they are. And some are smug about it to a point in which they feel like, well, people should worship the ground they walk on. I think being put in a position of authority doesn't change you as much as it puts you in a position in which your personality gets highlighted. So if you're genuinely like a nice and friendly person, you'll keep being nice and friendly. If you're genuinely a bit of a bellend, you're gonna be a bit more. Um, it's the same thing with authority, even at like a micro level, because you were talking about the police. Yeah, I've met police officers in several countries. I've met good ones, I've met bad ones, people that did it out of conviction that, okay, that we're actually helping society, keeping criminals off of streets, making sure everybody's safe, making sure everything goes without issues. And there have been people that, yeah, uh, cashed in on their authority to get bribes, get paid protection taxes, um, and other things like this. So I think it's a matter of your character and the fact that when put in a position of authority, your character gets highlighted in broader strokes. You know?
I think a big thing that I've learned over the years is I mean, in general, you can't afford to be naive. It could cost you your life. But also, there's this assumption that most people are good people or that they have your best interests at heart. They don't. That's not to say that everyone's evil or that most people are evil. I disagree. I think most people, like a majority maybe, are probably okay, not necessarily good or like, really, really good people. They're just okay, you know, like agreeable, may help you out, may not. Um, but if you look at the way society is constructed and the powers that be and who controls what, etc., I always think it's good to like kind of have your guard up a little bit and be cautious. So, like for example, if you are dealing with the police, be cautious. Don't trust them. Just be cautious. Go along with it. Do what you need to do in accordance with the law and stuff. But don't assume that they are there to help you. Remember that they are agents of the state. They're there to uphold the law, to do the state's bidding, right? So that because I think there's this misconception that like, oh, police are there to just protect you, and it's like, yeah, to a certain extent they are there to protect the public, but that's not their key goal, their only goal, their only um, purpose. And obviously, I know it's different in different countries. Like I've had friends from different parts of Europe that say that like police in the UK versus police in Europe is like night and day. Like, here you can actually have a conversation, befriend the police even. If the big one being if you call the police, they will show up. They'll actually show up. Oh, you got robbed, they will show up and actually investigate that shit. Whereas in other countries, sometimes you pick up the phone and be like, tell them, hey, my place got robbed, and they're like, oh, okay, well, why are you wasting our time with that? Legit, this is the thing. um So I
Yeah,
don't know. It's an interesting one that um
yeah. What I've seen after discussing like the police, I have a great respect for British police because, like I said, for the first 25 years of my life spent in Romania, I'm
yeah.
used to the police being like NPCs, like background characters. Like they're there just to feel the scenery. They don't do that much there.
Well, let me ask you this real quick, because this is a big one with UK police. There's the We have the thing of like, oh, Bobby's on the beat, the classic thing of like they go on a route, they walk around. There's often the conversations of police presence. More police officers around, it can make people feel even nervous or maybe make people feel safe. Often you hear people talk about it in Parliament where they're like, we need more police on the streets so that people feel safe. In Romania, when the police were around, did it make you feel safe?
No, or as not as safe as the police makes me feel. For example, in the UK,
Okay, so what would be the fault there? Are they just not as reactive? Is there not enough of them?
there's a lot of them. The
Okay.
problem is, first of all, most do it as get to get money quick to get some authority, to be able to just like strong arm their way into getting some respect. The average, at least up until like 7 years ago when I moved to the UK, the average Romanian police officer was little Billy Nomads that got picked on at school.
Really?
That decided that the only way he's going to ever get some respect in life if he wears a uniform.
But that must have led to a lot of corruption and like misuse of power then, surely. If you got those types of people in positions like that, they're definitely going to misuse that.
We are talking about the former communist country.
Okay. But
Corruption
look,
is common.
yeah, and look, forgive my ignorance here, but like I don't know. I know very little about Romania. Um, the only stuff I know as an Englishman is the classic stuff. So obviously, famously, Dracula is from, Transylvania in Romania. I know that there are French speaking people in Romania. I know of Romani gypsies, and that's it. That's all I know about Romania. Sorry to say, but I mean, I don't know. Teach us
Yeah.
about Romania a little bit. Come on, man. This is your chance to shine. Why should people care about Romania? What's Romania got to offer?
Well, we have a saying back home that I love, that we are geniuses as individuals, but idiots as a nation.
Interesting.
So if you take us as a group, we're not the nicest people around. If you take us individually, yeah, we've got some good music, some good uh, artists, some people that actually contributed to the greater well-being of the world. For example, Emil Palade, a chemist from the turn of the century, was the guy whose studies led to the discovery of insulin.
That's
And
fucking
it,
huge.
yeah, the problem is he was never credited because he never published his work. There was a Canadian guy that came after him, actually got the patent for insulin
Oh
synthesis. And that's
no.
why when people say, "Oh, who discovered insulin?" Oh, it's that Canadian guy. Nope. No, it's not.
How was it discovered later on that his work was formed the basis of it? How was that discovered?
It's the same thing with it's the same thing with Marconi in Italy and the radio.
Okay.
So it's the same process of reverse engineering because everybody knows. Okay, I think it's Guillermo or Giovanni Marconi. Anyway, the guy that made the radio, he made the radio, but the patent for each of the radio components was held by Tesla. He just like got every one of the bits and bobs that Tesla patented, put them together to form a radio, and got the patent on the finished product.
It's clever.
I think something like this happened. I'm not really familiar with the history of science, but as far as I know, yeah, people figured out. Okay, Palade had this academic papers written on the effects of insulin and how diabetes affects the body and how insulin dependency works and what it does. But he never got to like the finished product. So there was a guy that did like Palade did like 90% of the work and stopped. Can't remember for what reason. And then there was the guy just riding on his coattails that did the last percent of the work, but got the credit for it because it was the last 10% of the work.
That's happened quite a few times throughout history, hasn't it? Like there's the was it Thomas Edison and Tesla thing where I'm still not completely clued up on this. This is what I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I probably will be. So Tesla like discovered a type of electricity
Alternating
as
current.
yeah, AC, and then Edison discovered DC. All right.
Uh, Technically, yes.
What do you mean technically? Either is or isn't.
I'm very reluctant. Like I said, I'm not very familiar. I did some reading on it back when I was in uni, but that was more than 10 years ago.
Fair enough.
About the whole, they were called the current wars.
Mm,
AC versus DC in America, and with Thomas Edison representing the support of direct current and Tesla supporting AC. Though most of the research work in both sides was done by Tesla, because Edison, if you ask me, he might have been a decent scientist, not a good one, a decent one, but he was a marketing genius.
mm.
He was good at branding. He probably ran the first smear campaign against. Technically, it wasn't aimed at Tesla personally. It was aimed at alternating current, and he did this smear campaign showing people the risks of alternating current by doing public displays of what electricity does. He used to electrocute cows in
Oh,
like public
Jesus.
displays.
Yeah, I heard
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. The only thing these like shock shows, these like smear campaign, the only thing people got out of it was the values of the voltages used were later used in the electric chairs.
Wow. Okay.
But yeah, then he showed, oh, look, alternating current is dangerous. You could die. You can die from any type of currents if it goes through your body.
The Americans like really applaud Thomas Edison. They're like, oh, he's the grandfather of all these inventions, the light bulb, and so on and so forth, right? Um, Seems that like Tesla has a very interesting reputation amongst the world, and to me, it appears like the prevailing narrative is he invented a hell of a lot of things, but he doesn't nearly get the recognition for it. Why is this the case?
Marketing.
So it's purely just he just wasn't celebrated enough or marketed in the right way, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's marketing. Really good scientists, really proficient scientists.
I'd argue ahead of his time. When I look at some of the things he was doing, I'm like, fucking hell. Imagine him now. Like,
Yeah, really good scientists tend to be shut-ins. They tend to be socially awkward. They
mhm.
don't network a lot. They don't brag about their work a lot, even if it's probably worth bragging about in certain scenarios. Like, keep in mind, think of the greatest scientist that Europe ever put out, Da Vinci. Da Vinci, in his day and age, wasn't famous for his inventions. He was famous for his art. If he wasn't an artist, probably nobody would have gave a damn about him until probably centuries later.
That's
People
interesting.
got interested in Da Vinci's work as an inventor a lot, like probably more than a century after his death. And usually because one popular myth, and it is a myth, but it's still a nice story that helped popularize his reputation as an inventor was that he was the guy that invented scissors. He wasn't, but still nice story. And I'm a
Who
firm
invented
believer in the
who
fact
invented scissors? What?
that's a bit of a loaded question because it depends
Is
who
it?
you ask. It depends who you ask. It depends on the type of scissors you because you have like two types of scissors: the ones that you just squeeze,
Yeah,
like
okay, yeah,
garden shears,
right.
and then you have the classic cross
Well, that's I think
X
most people
scissors.
when they're thinking of the X ones, yeah, that's scissors, isn't it? Because garden shears, you don't. No one really calls them scissors, do they? They're shears.
In English,
Oh,
in
really?
Romanian we use it's garden
Okay.
scissors for the shears and normal scissors for the scissors. We don't have a different word for it, and I think
This is
probably
why I love
most
doing this show,
languages.
man. I always learn shit like all the time. It's brilliant. Love it. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, we are shaped by the languages we speak, and even more so by the languages we don't speak. That's why one of my hobbies is etymology, like the origins of words. Why do we say something
That's something that's
like
always
this?
fascinated me.
Yeah,
Like how language has evolved from all the way up to where we are at today, you know? Like
yeah.
how?
It's adapting to a need. That's the reason why.
I guess yeah, I guess there just wouldn't have been enough like sounds to convey what we need to convey to each other.
That and the fact that sounds and grunts and pointing works for immediate reality for concrete aspects. Okay, rock, tree, sky. Think of all stereotypical caveman in media. Okay, they use simple words, verbs and nouns only. Very in rare cases, very simple adjectives, and they talk in like concrete realities. But as probably everybody realizes if they sit a minute to think about it, we need words for abstract concepts. Okay. Love, loss, longing, pain, loneliness. You can't point at loneliness. Can't point at love.
I just wonder though, where was the point where we realized and started to think in more complex ways? Because we came from like being hunter gatherers, and just our primary concern was you know find a mate, procreate, eat, hunt, sleep, survival. That was it.
Uh,
You know.
yeah, I think probably somewhere in the Neolithic, because like the last step of human, think of it like this: the last step of human evolution is the Homo sapiens,
Mm.
the wizened man. Sapienza in Latin means wisdom. So our last step of evolution is wisdom.
It always makes me laugh as well when you think about the wisdom and the progression of the human race, right? And don't get me wrong, we're still doing amazing things right now. As much as I hate to say it, some amazing things are happening with AI, and there is potential there. And obviously, when robotics catches up, we're going to see a lot of changes and developments in life for human beings. But at the same time, I look at society and where we're at, and I'm like, it reminds me of 1984. I hate to say it. I know it's cliche to say that, but I remember reading that a few years ago. I was sitting on a decking somewhere in Estonia in a summer house, just reading it and going like, this is just life now. This is life now. And especially the moment where it speaks about people watching the television, watching football, betting on football, and like where their kind of priorities were. There's an amazing scene in the book, which I think is really underrated, but it perfectly sums this up. The main character is trying to appeal to the proletariats. He's trying to appeal to them and like say like, hey, like, don't you remember how it was before? Don't you want to rise against your masters? Don't like there's a really really old guy that he talks to, like a guy in his 70s 80s, and he's like, you remember what it was like before? And this guy is just kind of like so out of it. Like he kind of like remembers, but in that kind of frustrating way where he's like, oh yeah, they had top hats. But then that's about the extent of his ability to analyze it. And the main character gets really like frustrated and realizes in the end he can't sort of fight the system. The system is in place and it's inevitable. But I look at like the way society is now, and like how we're so deeply obsessed with sex and ideas like relevancy and being, validated and all that shit. Like, fucking hell, dude. Like, when I was younger, people would go to live events way more than they do now. And what I mean is like local events. Like, obviously, people still go to gigs and stuff, but not nearly as much as they used to. A lot more people are online, chronically online, and it's actually made us more isolated and lonely because communication is different. Like what you and I do, going to the pub, hanging out, talking, like we barely touch our phones. But we grew up in a world where technology was developing. It wasn't at the forefront of everything. It was a driving force. It wasn't the only thing that matters. Whereas now I feel like for most people, that is the case. And it's fucking terrifying, to
Yeah,
be honest.
you brought up two good points, and I don't know which one to address first because you started talking about Orwell and like 1994 and this
Mm,
whole the changing the language.
right.
And I'd like to address that first, if
Sure.
I may. Like I said, I come from a former communist country, and I've seen this. Both my grandmothers passed away when I was fairly young, but both of them were born before the communists came to power. So they had vague and mainly childhood memories of how it was before when we still had a king. and the manner of speech was a bit different. The outlook on life was a bit different. But then we have, okay, so the communists came to power in Romania in 1948. Communism fell in 1989. We had what, 41 years of communism, probably more or less. And the first thing a dictatorship does in order to enforce the status quo is change the language. Change the language. Romanian used to have a lot of French words in common parlance. Even common people had French, like peppered their normal speech with French, and that was something that the communists couldn't do. It's a Western language, decadent language. You can't have like pepper our speech with French words. And you can't exactly like replace it with Romanian. So it's like, okay, let's pepper it with Russian words because we like the Russians. They're the big brothers from the East. Um, and now you have the same thing. You have this, to quote Orwell, the newspeak. You, it's not that you can't say certain words, is that certain words tend to be softened up. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, sometimes it's warranted, if you ask me. Sometimes it's not. That's why people from the Balkans or like Eastern Europeans tend to be a little jaded when it comes to issues like, I don't know, saying, oh, we say people with disabilities. We don't say handicapped people. It's like, we say handicapped people. It's a clinical term. It's not an insult. We say, there's this thing I always bring up, which for us it's a joke. For some people it's normal and natural and not a laughing matter. France doesn't have cleaning ladies or cleaning men or cleaners, because they think of the word cleaner as being derogatory.
Ooh,
They're called surface technicians in
ooh,
France.
that's funny.
I was like,
what's
I'm
te-
mopping
what's
the floor.
what's technical? The thing that bothers me is what's technical about it.
Oh, there's an art to wielding a mop, my friend.
Oh no, dude, I know I've fucking mopped many floors in my time, but there's no science behind it. There's technique, sure. There's a way to do it properly, but it's not fucking rocket science, is it? You get shown the technique, you do it correctly. Job done. Now, don't get me wrong, that might sound like I'm overlooking cleaning. Like the difficulty in cleaning is more I've found to be things like timing and also like your ability to actually put the effort in because some things are easy to clean, they're quick. And if you've got the right cleaning materials, resources, perfect. It's going to be a quick job. But then when you've got instances where like you're deep cleaning stuff or, let's say you work in a bar as a cleaner and there's like a big party and the place is completely trashed. Guess what? It's your job to fix that. Oh, the toilets are blocked up. That's your job. Stuff like that. And it's takes a lot longer and it's a thankless job. And I've done cleaning jobs where I've been just like exhausted afterwards. Like, and it might have only been like a few hours work, but it felt like I worked a week. I find that's where the difficulty in cleaning lies. And I've seen it. I've seen some people who take the job very seriously and work hard, and they're exhausted afterwards. And then I've seen people that half-ass it, and then I'm like, why do we even pay this person? So I don't know. That's my 2 cents on cleaning.
Yeah. Again, we have a saying. I'm a big fan of sayings. I think countries, a people's list of sayings encompasses like their whole ethos, their whole
Yeah,
life philosophy, their whole outlook. And
completely agree.
we have very traditional sayings, and we have sayings that came together during the past 100 years, mainly thanks to the communists. One one saying we have. I'm trying to translate it. The translation doesn't carry that well, but Time passes, paychecks go on. Timpul trece, leafa merge. So just act busy because at the end of the day, you're still getting paid. So some people have a better work ethic and just say, okay, what am I? I'm a cleaner. What do I need to do today? I need to mop this whole building top to bottom. Okay, I'll do it well.
I will say there's something to that. What you said there, like looking busy. There's been times, right, where all right, maybe I'm a bit tired, and I notice that other people are doing fuck all, and I'm the one doing work. So I work hard. You know this. I work hard, but I'm not stupid. If I see I'm the only person working and other people need to pull their weight, I will deliberately take easier jobs. And I've seen it fuck people off before. But the difference is because my attitude is always work hard, prioritize, and also look busy. Like if you're standing around with your fingers in your hands in your pockets or you're on your phone, you're just sitting there doing nothing, you get picked out. But if you're looking busy, people just kind of leave you alone. Even if you're doing a objectively easier job, you're busy doing that job. So people leave you alone. I've always found that quite interesting in workplaces, you know.
Yeah, there's an art to it, and for former communist countries, this ties into how again change comes from the top down. Uh, they had quotas. Every work position had work quotas, and there was this obsession, and this comes from the Soviet era and from the Soviets of you're not supposed to meet your quota. You're supposed to always go over your quota, and the quotas always got higher and higher to a point in which they became absurd. There is it's an actual cultural current started from the Soviets. It's called Stakhanovism. This comes from a fictional Russian worker called Stakhanov. He was a fictional
Hanovism.
Stakhanovism,
Stakhanovism. Okay.
Stakhanovism. And this comes from a fictional Russian miner called Stakhanov. The guy never existed. But that didn't stop the Soviet propaganda. And they said, "Oh, Stakhanov can this little miner from the no, this young miner from this little mine somewhere next to Vladivostok can mine 50 carts of coal a day, or he does like this or this or this or this." People actually studied it after the fall of the Eastern Bloc. They actually studied it. It is humanly impossible with a pickaxe to mine that even half of that. You don't have the power, the speed, the strength, and the stamina to go at it, even if you would be working 18 hours straight. And it's this absurd this absurd level of quotas that most former socialist countries had that kind of made us a bit jaded regarding work because every workplace had probably at least 50% more staff than it needed. And usually the problem of like meeting or exceeding quotas never came from the workers themselves. It came from, I don't know, lack of adequate technology, lack of prime materials to use, lack of, okay, you could have, let's say you have a ball bearing factory, okay? It's like everything's set up. You can pump out boxes of ball bearings, like one every 2 minutes or something like that. Fair enough. If you don't have any iron ore, anything to like any raw materials to turn into those ball bearings, you'll have people acting busy. I remember a friend of my dad's used to tell me he was a lathe worker. And he said, "Oh, I started in my 20s, bright and cheery, uh, clean uniform every time, like clean work clothes. I shaved every morning to be fresh, showered, shaved, prim and proper, and did my quota. And I was like, oh, boss, look, I did my 10 10-piece quota today and I made an extra piece. Ooh, very nice. And then the quota started being, you can do 11 pieces constantly. Okay, fair enough. Then your quota is 11 pieces and see if you could make the 12th and so on and so on and so on. And the because of the bonuses and because of the praise that you used to get, the results of the workers got bumped up the higher up the ladder you get. So if you have, like I said, little Bobby the lathe worker saying, "Oh, I did my quota of 10 pieces and did an extra one," his boss would be like, "Oh, very nice." His boss would go to his boss and say, "We have a quota of 15 pieces, but we made 20." Go higher up the ladder. We had the quota of 20 pieces, but we made 30, and so on. And up until you get to the president that says, "Oh, we have a quota of 100 pieces, and we made 250." And the people upstairs based a country's whole economy on this very, very ample web of lies, to a point in which most communists died because those countries were bankrupt because their whole economy was based off of word of mouth and saying, "Oh yeah, sure, we can do that." And some workers just decided, when they had nothing to work on, just decided to look busy. I remember restaurant workers. I spoke with someone that used to be a restaurant worker, and people were always at work and had very little money. Therefore, nobody actually went to go and eat in restaurants, especially in the 80s, after 82, when the economy really took a toll in Romania. And I remember there was this guy that worked as a waiter, and he told me, said, I needed to act busy, so I had a plate that I kept polishing. And in the last 5 years of work, I spent so much time polishing that specific, because he had one specific like favorite plate. Not only did he manage to mat it, but it was visibly thinner than the other plates in the same set. He literally polished it so much he just like ground it down, because there was nobody to serve, there was nothing to do, but you needed to be there for 8 hours and act busy and look busy. So
Whoa,
it ended
whoa,
up,
whoa. Hold on. So like no one's fucking eating there
yeah,
and they're still trying to push this idea of you got to do stuff.
yeah, yeah. You're at work, you need to work.
That reminds okay, this is insanity, right? This reminds me of I worked some shifts at the AO Arena when I did agency work, right? And the job's straightforward. You just serve people like whatever. You want some alcohol, you want a hot dog, great, go enjoy your fucking show. Brilliant. Straightforward. Now, the problem was prior to the events happening, you get like time to set up, probably takes like half an hour, maybe an hour, right? Then you're ready. But you wouldn't always get an influx of people. Like sometimes you would, they'd come straight in, boom, and they're gonna watch the support band or the support act, and then whatever. So it's business as usual, straight into it. But there were other times when it was so slow, like no fuckers there, or it's like one person's there. So you're just standing there. There's nothing to do, like legitimately nothing to do. No deep cleaning, no cleaning at all. You're just standing there. But you'd still have these fucking annoying bosses that would walk around and just be like, you need to be being busy, guys, we need to be working." And it's like, doing what? Like, do you want to give me some work? Because there's no fucking work to do. And that's just some weird power play thing. That's like so they can show their bigger bosses, like, look at my busy team that's always working, that's always doing things. And it's like, sometimes there's legitimately nothing to do. Like the hotel that I do a lot of shifts at, right? I appreciate them so much because they don't have a go at you if there's nothing to do. We accept that there are moments when there's just nothing to do and we're waiting. There's in between times. You can't start this thing yet because you're waiting on people or you're whatever, but we're prepped for it. We're ready for the next thing. There's just nothing to do right now, and maybe sometimes it might be like everything's clean, so there's nothing to do there, or we can't really start some of those bigger jobs yet because that would eat up too much time. So you're kind of in this like weird limbo space. But a lot of workplaces seem to be like that, and it's just baffling to me. And it's just even funnier to hear that, like in the Soviet Union, they had similar problems because it's like that is something that like there's literally nothing you can do about, like at all. No amount of marketing would have changed that. You know?
Yeah, because that's the thing, and this is in my opinion, a shift from the organic or self-evident needs of a workplace and the ones that are just made up. For
Yeah.
example, I don't know. Let's take the average medieval peasant. I'm a medievalist. 90% of my examples come from the Middle Ages. Let's take the medieval peasant. So the medieval peasant had a plot of land. Okay, you need to plow it, you need to sow it, you need to do this and this, that, and the other. The work schedule was fairly self-evident. You wake up a bit before dawn, eat something, grab your scythe or your plow or whatever, go to the field, start doing your work. Midday, you'd hear the church bell ring. That's your sign to take a break, have some lunch.
Hmm.
You'd have some lunch, you'd finish your lunch. You don't have like, oh, I need to finish my lunch. 1 hour lunch break. Some people eat faster, some people eat slower. Uh, for example, I remember when I was uh, had this work experience, 2 weeks at the BBC in Salford. We had lunch breaks. Everybody noon-ish, people would pop out for lunch. And my supervisor there told me, okay, we start our lunch breaks at noon. You need to be back by 1 o'clock. We've got an hour. Just got out of the building. There's a small, can't remember, Tesco, Salisbury, something. Uh, right in the next building. Popped down there, got the meal deal, sat on a bench, had the meal deal, went up. Took me 20 minutes. And at some point, I was discussing with the people there, just out of sheer anthropological curiosity. What did you do on your lunch breaks? Some people just had like a small bag of crisps or like a small box of candy. Some people went down to there was something between a pub and a restaurant downstairs and had like a full 2 course meal. Some people just had a coffee. Some people were back in 10 minutes. Some people didn't. Just went for a walk. Like you've been through Media City. It's a nice place to walk around if you just want to clear your head. Um,
I've always thought like an hour is overkill for a lunch break. I think half an hour is kind of pretty on the money because like if you need a bit longer, half an hour kind of works. Whereas a lot of the time like I'm the same as you do. A lot of the time, like once I've eaten and just had like a few minutes to just kind of rest my brain. I normally what I'll do is grab food, eat, coffee, back to it. That's me, to be honest, and that seems to work pretty well. What the fuck are you doing for an hour? Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
uh, I think the modern 9 to 5 work schedule.
you don't need it for a 9 to 5. Like, if we were you and I working on a farm, yeah, I need that hour. But like, because I've worked on farms before, you need that proper time to rest. It's physical work. You might even need to have a quick sleep. But like the 9 to 5, you're sitting behind a fucking desk, and yeah, it's mentally draining. Granted, but still, you don't need an hour.
Yeah, because the 9 to 5. Keep in mind the 9 to 5 is a cookie cutter solution to a huge array of very different problems and very different work scenarios. Like a 9 to 5 works for an office, might work for a small workshop, but you can't do 9 to 5s. Imagine the police doing 9 to 5s. It's like, okay, No crime after
It's,
5 p.m. Why? Because we're back home.
imagine that you call them up. You're like, oh, sorry, someone's burned my house down. You're like, no, sorry, it's after 5. Clocked off now. Crime's over for the day.
Yeah, it's absurd, and it bleeds into like some of these like absurd scenarios to a point in which the Romain
No, no, no. Please keep
yeah
talking. I
the Romanian postal service used to have a schedule that you could only send them emails from 9 to 5.
fucking ridiculous.
And the curiosity, everybody, like, there was this running gag for probably went on for like a year before they took that down. It's be like, what happens if I send you an email at 6 p.m.? Where is it gonna land? Are you gonna just delete it because it's after the approved schedule? Like, not.
So
Yeah.
you're talking about something that's like a big hot button topic for me. I fucking hate the 9 to 5. I think it's utterly pointless, a waste of time. I don't think it's realistic. I'm sure back in the day it made sense because like most of the world was operating at least from a like office perspective, because that's the thing, isn't it? Like when you think like of the 9 to 5, it's office jobs, and people that have only ever worked in those jobs assume that everyone works that schedule. But of course, it doesn't. Like if you work in customer service, you don't work a 9 to 5. You work morning or late or like mid shifts or whatever. You work according to when it's busy. You work in shifts. I've worked every kind of job there is hours wise over the last God, how many years? I don't know, 12, 13 years, something like that. And the problem I found with 9 to 5s is that they're just not realistic as far as like the use of time. And people don't work the whole 9 to 5. Like you probably are useful for about 30, 40% of that time. The rest of the time, people are listening to shit, watching Netflix, fucking, procrastinating. Because human beings, like, you can't force us to just strap on the nuzzle and just blast through it. It's just not realistic. And I've tried. Like, I remember in the early days when I was fresh out of my degree, like, I really tried hard to just work always, but you just can't. You can't physically do it. So you learn to sort of do the 80-20 rule. And then when I started to realize is that like I would get most of my work done in the first few hours of the day. And now I just wouldn't have any fucking work for from lunchtime till 5. I got nothing. Dude, I've worked in different countries. I've worked jobs all around, up north, south, you name it, right? I've always been right on this. Work does not need to be done in that period of time. Like it can be done in a few hours, right? Now, I'm talking office jobs, work that's like project based, stuff like that. I do appreciate that if you work in, say, sales, as an example, those are set hours, and that's when you've picked to be available, and so the landscape is a bit different. But I would argue sales is kind of more in the kind of customer service sphere where, well, obviously it is, but like there's not you can't really get around that. Though those are the hours that are set. We could change the hours if we wanted to, which I think would be better, to be honest. I wouldn't mind getting sales calls later on in the day if that was the agreed upon time and it was more suitable for me, obviously within reason. But a lot of this is something we've agreed on, like, oh, it has to be this way. So like whenever I've questioned these things, like the logic of these things, I was often met with the response of, oh, well, that's just what we do. That's just the 9 to 5. We have to start at 9 and finish at 5. Oh, no, you can't finish an hour earlier and start an hour earlier. I'm like, what the fuck difference does it make? What if I don't take my lunch? Oh, no, 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 you have to. Why? Because that's what we do. Oh, okay. And the biggest job that made me realize how much of a crock of shit overall it is was when I started doing marketing work like on a contract basis. I know you can appreciate this as a fellow marketeer. Um, a lot of the time, marketing work, there is daily stuff that's done. things like social media posting and stuff like that. But a lot of it doesn't have to be done right this fucking minute. It'll be an ongoing thing. It'll be like everyday tracking, but like a project can last a few months or something like that. Like a campaign would be like over the course of a month, but maybe the prep for it took a bit longer. Point is, when I would do like this subcontracting work, I would go project by project. And maybe you work for that project, then you don't work for a while. Or if it was, remember I was subcontracting for this company and it wasn't a marketing role, it was a sales role, but I did their hours, but I would kind of mix it up. I'd only work like 3 days a week. And same problem. I get most of my shit done in the first few hours, and then after that, I was done. I was like, I don't need to be doing it, so I'd just do other shit, and they wouldn't know. I was on call, I was available, but I was doing other shit.
Yeah, and I think work culture shifted a lot in the last 100 years, but at some point, probably during the 60s, we kind of got stuck and never moved on from that. Because circling back to our friends, the Victorians, and at the very end of the Industrial Revolution, we figured out, okay, the longer you work, the more you make, the more money you make. Let's work as
Mm-mm.
long as we can. We needed Henry Ford, and I think the Henry Ford in the 30s or 40s was the guy that popularized the 5 day working week and the 9 to 5 as a schedule. That was very well adapted. So first of all, so people wouldn't overwork themselves. Second of all, it reduced general fatigue and workplace injuries. And third of all, it just kind of became a thing. You say we use I'm going at my 9 to 5 to talk about a full-time job even now, almost 100 years later. But now, with the rise of AI, which adds a lot of speed to certain jobs, with the advent of what happened during and right after COVID, of a lot of people working from home and showing the general population, showing the world, okay, most jobs, even if they're, especially if they're office jobs, don't require you to physically go into the office.
Mm. Well, that's a big one, isn't it? These days is the whole work from home thing. I've had arguments with people about this before. But they're like, oh, well, we need you in the office. No, you don't. You don't need me in the office. You want me in the office. It's a control mechanism. You don't need me to be there. I don't need to be there to do this fucking job. The only time I need to be in the office to do that job, actually, no. When I think, because I was going to say like sales, but no, you can do that from home. Don't need to be there. Um, the thing they always say is meetings. They say it's a lot easier to get together in a meeting room if you're physically there, and it's like it makes no difference. You just do a fucking Zoom call. Same thing, literally
Yeah.
the same.
First of all, I would like to call myself a hipster. I worked from home before it was cool. I've been working for from home for the past 6 years, to a point in which COVID didn't affect my work schedule at all.
Yeah,
I keep doing this running gag that it took me a month to figure out that COVID was a thing, because
really.
yeah, there was very little there was no change in my work schedule. Had the same meetings with the same people at the same times. Had the same amount of work. It would have gone by unnoticed if I wasn't interested in like the goings on of the world, or I if I didn't have to pop down to the shops. That's when it hit me. Like the COVID hit me in a Tesco.
Did you
Uh,
hold on? Did you like walk in and like everyone's wearing masks and you're like, wait, what the fuck's going on?
Something like that. Something like that.
Jesus.
Yeah, cause we
So you
we
you didn't know. You didn't know
no
like there's like a serious risk. You just like, oh fuck, this is some dystopian shit. What's going on?
no, because I'm used to we used to. This is another very Eastern European thing.
Hmm.
When I was growing up and I was in school, we had this running gag that there's the yearly plague. Each year there was this some sort of epidemic of swine flu or bird flu or
Same here,
something,
dude. Yeah, I remember that.
and we were supposed to we had these little like spongy mats soaked in antiseptic, and we had to wipe our
Oh,
feet every time we walked in and or out of the school.
what the
Uh,
fuck?
yeah, we were
Well, bare
supposed.
feet, like
No, no, no,
barefoot.
no, 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 our shoes.
Okay,
We
still
were
weird though.
supposed to wash our hands between classes.
That's good. Yeah, you should do that.
I mean, yeah, but when it's enforced, it becomes the subject of mockery.
Really? Well,
Yeah,
like, haha, clean hands. What?
it's like no, no,
Like,
it's kids will be kids. Kids will be like I had people in my class that was skipping classes saying, sorry, miss, there's no soap in the boys' room. I can't come into class." Like stuff like that. Keep in mind, kids will be kids, and it becomes a subject of mockery. Same with like the whole yearly plagues to a point in
wait, did
which
anyone ever turn around and be like, "Oh, miss, I don't know how to clean my hands. Can you show me?"
oh no, it happened. It happened.
Really?
Uh,
That's the dick move.
not something I've seen directly, but I've heard it happen. Like there were it's the same the same general spirit when COVID struck. To a point in which, yeah, it's like, oh, I watch the news. I read news outlets in several languages from several countries from all across the political spectrum. Uh, and yeah, okay, fair enough. This is something bigger than the yearly bird flu, swine flu, stuff like that. But I didn't realize the impact. Also, keep in mind the UK was one of the last, if not the last, European countries to actually enforce
Oh yeah.
social distancing and
Dude,
wearing masks in
we
public and
were
stuff like that.
we were so late. Like I remember like people getting actively like aggressively annoyed at Boris because he Boris was like laughing it off. He was like, "No, it's fine," and he was like walking around hospitals like, "Oh, I'll shake their hands," and then like literally like a month later he got COVID as well. Um, but the interesting thing is, I think I told you about this, but I'll share it again on the show. Manchester was way ahead of the game because Manchester is twinned with St. Petersburg in Russia and also Wuhan, where the actual virus allegedly originated. And so all of the information that was being given in Wuhan and so on was being given to us as well. They were like, well, look, I don't know what your government's doing, but this is what we're doing. You should do this. And that's what we were doing. We were building the was it the Florence Nightingale temporary like hospital thing. There's like a center where you could get tested for COVID and you know all the PPE shit was there, and basically it was just like
Yeah.
a facility for all of that and to help people. We were building that in like late 2019. Boris didn't bother to put us into quarantine until like mid to late I think middle of March. But as you say, like most of Europe had already caught on and had put things into effect. And I remember even thinking at the time, like, we should probably take this seriously because I've been hearing about this since late last year. But in 2019, it was described as like an isolated thing in China that seemed pretty serious, but like not something that would take over the entire world, you know. And then, of course, it did. And it was surreal because nothing like that had ever happened in our lifetime. Obviously, I've understood that historically it has. Weirdly, timing wise as well, like the one that everyone kept talking about was how I think in the 1820s and the 1920s there was like a big epidemic and people wore masks and nearly died. And it happened at the exact same time. I'm like, that's fucking weird. That's some weird coincidence shit.
Every century has its pandemic. Okay, so think of it from I don't know the Justinian plague in the in ancient times. Then you have the Great Plague in the latter half of the 1300s, up until, like you said, in the 1920s, you had the Spanish flu epidemic. So every century has this massive health concern, this massive pandemic. And yeah, some say okay, it's the soul of the planet regulating the population, culling the weak. It's a grim outlook, and it's a bit absurd if you think about it. But no, historically, it has happened. It has tested society because the interesting thing, like speaking as a historian here, the interesting thing I found regarding these pandemics is not the disease itself, it's how society responds to it.
Hmm. I think if
Uh,
it's taught me anything, it's that we're all batshit insane, and that people like. I'll never forget watching people fight over fucking toilet roll and like pasta and shit. And I remember thinking like, this is a pandemic, and to be honest, it was quite tame as far as like. It was scary. I remember the first few months were pretty scary, but like it was what it was. You just got on with it. You adapted, and I think human beings were pretty good at adapting to shit. But I do remember thinking, like, if this is how people react to this, which is tame, imagine how they'd react to like a fucking zombie apocalypse scenario. Like, the people would fucking lose their marbles. They wouldn't be able to cope. And like, I remember people laughing about the whole toilet roll thing. Like, most of the world's population doesn't even fucking use toilet roll. Like, that's a luxury, a Western luxury. And but people were like hoarding that shit, and like there was that famous stories in America, like there was some guy who like bought up loads and loads of toilet roll, hand sanitizer, all this, and he was trying to sell it on and make profit, and he got like caught out, and he had to give it all away or something. It got seized, and he made no money from it, and that was a bit of like poetic justice there, but just yeah, you're right. I looked at it the same way, like from an anthropological perspective of like this is fascinating. People are fucking crazy. Like
yeah,
like even just stuff like yourself, my life didn't really change. If anything, it just made me realize I need to get out more. But I do remember thinking like I was fine. Like the only thing that I but bothered me was that I missed my family because I just moved to this city and I didn't know anyone and I couldn't go see my family. And that really sucked. And I was isolated and I was lonely. But as far as like the day to day, fine. Dare I say, even somewhat enjoyable. It was cool to be able to go into the city and like no fuckers there. And it was like something out of like, a game. It was pretty cool. I was just like living out my like apocalyptic scenarios. It was nice to not see as many people around. I felt like people were nicer and more respectful and kind of like, hey, like we're all in it together kind of thing. Um, but then and what's even more interesting is how life completely just reverted back to how it was before. Like I remember within weeks of like all the restrictions being lifted and things go back to normal, like people just didn't wash their hands. I still see it to this day, and I'm like, how the fuck is that not being still enforced? How have we just let that slip when we were all under lockdown for like nearly 2 years, and like people still don't do that? Blows
yeah.
my mind, man.
It,
Fucking crazy.
it goes to show how people react in crisis situations and how unused to having like a major international health concern we are as a people. It also because you're mentioning restrictions, and
Mm,
something I did during the pandemic was I was not actively, but I looked at the weird restrictions in each country, and looking at the if you go back and look at the restrictions that each country imposed, it shows a lot about that country's culture. For example, and this is probably the most extreme European case, and people outside of Belgium made a lot of fun of it, but it was an actual thing. For example, the Belgian health ministers, one of the restrictions, she came live on air and gave the normal health restrictions of uh wash your hands, wear masks in public, keep a 2 meter distance from one another. And one of the restrictions she imposed was refrain from sexual activities that involve five or more people. because swinging and swinging parties are huge in Belgium to a point in which it's a national health concern in case of a pandemic. And it shows you a little glimpse of the culture. There were American states in which, like the state health authority mentioned the fact that diarrhea is not the symptom of COVID, so people would stop like hoarding toilet roll. There were restrictions in Texas. There was restrictions on how much ammo you could buy because people were stocking up on ammo, thinking, "Oh, COVID's gonna be a zombie virus that's gonna turn people into mindless zombies. We need to stock up on ammo." Um, there were in Italy, especially in the north, there was a restriction on how much pasta you could buy. A- any other food was uncapped. You could get as much as you want. Pasta, pasta, eggs, and flour, like the main things you need for pasta. Those were the only three capped food items that you couldn't buy more than, I don't know, a bag of flour and probably like a carton of eggs and like 2 boxes of pasta or something like that. And people were outraged massively. I was like, just buy bread, just eat something else. Nah, no.
Yeah, I didn't I never got that. Like I remember my local shop, once everyone lost their fucking marbles and bought out the entire store's worth of toilet roll and all this shit. I'll be honest, I was a little bit like, okay, what am I gonna do about toilet? And I started thinking about options and stuff. And then I spoke to the guy at the counter. I was like, so how long? He's like, it's like, dude, like less than a week, if that. Like, this is what these idiots don't realize is like this in no way affects our supply routes or anything. Like, we still have our standard deliveries coming just because these idiots have bought up everything. We'll just order more in. Like, do you mean? Boom, problem solved. And he was right. Like after that, like they always were completely stocked on that. They did continually not have pasta and cans and shit. But like you, I just bought other stuff. Like it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I remember because I survive. I'm very lazy. I'm a fairly good cook, but I never enjoyed cooking just for myself. And
Mm.
since me and my flatmate have radically different schedules, different eating hours, different stuff like that, and our diets diverged a lot. I just reverted back to just getting frozen pizza. And I remember during COVID, they said, "You, of course, I'm a creature of habit. I'm a Taurus. I buy 10 of the same thing because I enjoy it. It's like, might as well. If it works, don't mess with it." And I remember our local big Morrison's, which is where we usually do our bi-weekly shop, had a cap that you couldn't buy more than two of the same product.
Mm.
It, especially with food stuff. Like it wasn't heavily enforced on like, I don't know, deodorant or like socks, for example, but for food stuff it was heavily enforced. And you'd see people, like there's people that, because it's like what, half a mile from where I live, so I kind of recognize the usuals. uh and I knew people that usually bought like in bulk 10 frozen pizzas, and they were very shy about, like, okay, I will only get two, and I'll come back in tomorrow, get another two, and come back in tomorrow and get another two. But I was like, okay, we can't afford, due to scheduling conflicts, we can't afford going shopping every day. We can't. And I was like, okay, let's branch out. So I was like, I can't take 10 of the same pizzas. I was like, okay, fair enough. I'll take one of each. And would leave with a trolley full of like 20 pizzas, 20 frozen pizzas, but they were all different brands.
Didn't you just like go in, buy two, come back out, leave shopping with a mate, and just come back in again and just shop again? Like,
Some people did that. Some people did that. Some people got told off for it because
it
people that
counts as a new shop though, you know?
it counts as a new shop, but keep in mind they were purposefully understaffed. There
Which
was
I never understood that. Why were they understaffed? Well, I guess it was because of. Yeah,
To reduce
totally.
exposure. To reduce
Yeah,
exposure.
yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right.
But it was like I said, you got told off. Like you could do it, but you kind of got told off. Like made seriously, you got shamed for it. There wasn't like a
Shame,
yeah,
shame.
yeah. But you people found workarounds. Like you'd be surprised in crisis situations how creative the human mind can get when it comes to natural disasters or weird situations like that. The human mind works in fascinating ways.
Couple of final questions for you. What's the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice:
Hmm.
never take any information you get for granted. This was something my late father taught me, and I'll forever be grateful for him for that. Because even when I was a kid, you're a child, 4 or 5. Oh, Daddy, why is the sky blue? And the first person he made me doubt was himself. He said, "Oh, the sky is blue." Keep in mind, my dad was an engineer, and his field of specialty was optics. He could have explained the whole phenomenon of, oh, light reflects, and because blue light's a certain frequency, that's why the sky is blue, which is something you shouldn't explain to a 4-year-old because they're never gonna get. That was like, oh, the sky is blue because the sun and the rays pass, and this is how. Yeah, but I'm not sure of it. We have that encyclopedia. You might want to have a look inside that as well. Or I saw this book at the local library that talks about like weather and the sky and rainbows and stuff like that. Do you want me to buy that for you? You might like it. It might explain it better than I can. My dad was a great storyteller, a great teacher. He actually taught maths for a while when he was in uni. He was a great storyteller, really patient, really good. He used to tutor people in maths. Um, but yeah, like I said, he just said take everything with a grain of salt, question everything, double check everything, which is something that bled into my academic life because any good historians and journalists work off the same principle. Check any information you get from at least 3 different sources.
Solid advice right there. Thank you for sharing. What's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
Uh, Rock bottom doesn't have a basement. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah, I've been struggling with. I'll be honest, because I'm a fairly open person. You know me.
Hmm.
I've been struggling with my mental health in the past month or so,
Okay.
and I realized that yeah, okay, at some points in life things look grim. Okay, your relationships with your friends or your family just like dull down and cool off. Okay, I'm 3,000 miles away from my family. I have this running gag that my roommate is my cousin for or for tax purposes, but we're not actually related. Yeah, we've known each other for the better part of 16 years, but we're not related. Um, Even popping down into town to see you or Josh or our other friends, it's an expense, it's an effort. It takes me about 40-50 minutes in the best of cases to get to town, and that's by cab, and that cab's around 20 quid, and I need to get back. If I were to, I don't know, pop down the tram, the nearest tram stop's about a mile away. It's not the nicest walk. And it takes me from mine to, let's say, St. Peter's. So the closest tram stops to GC takes an hour and 45, almost 2 hours to get there. Uh, so yeah, at some point you figure out, okay, I've got friends that I could meet, but I'd rather have a chat with them online because it's cheaper and faster and more convenient. I need to work more, but you probably know this. It's hard to like push yourself into working when you're in a bad headspace. Even though, oh, the money would help if I could clock in a few more hours, I'd get a bit of extra money and handle some bills or handle or buy myself something that I would enjoy. I don't know, a new guitar strings, which is one of our cheap, simple pleasures as musicians, is buying new strings. Um, and yeah, at some point, it's like, okay, I don't have money. I'm in debt. In my case, I'm single. I'm lonely. I can't see my friends. I can't afford to get a pint. What am I doing? And then it's like, okay, things could be worse. Things could realistically get worse from here. But right now, it's not that bad. Just like try something else. Okay. I got into listening to podcasts, and apparently I got into participating at podcasts now, thanks to your lovely self. Um, I got into watching Twitch streams. I got into reading again. I was used to be a big reader. I haven't finished a book since I moved to the UK, to my great shame. And I used to like finish at least 2 or 3 books a month when I was back home. Uh, the spending, yeah, I know the common idea is okay, you're getting in your own head and you're spending too much time with yourself and it does funny things to you. But if you pace it and if you frame it, and it leads to some interesting things. You rediscover interesting aspects of your personality, of your outlook on life. You get your principles tested. Uh, but yeah, even then, if you're at your lowest low, first of all, 9 times out of 10, you can get lower. But you can only get that sad, that downtrodden. And then at some point, I don't know, you see something, it makes you chuckle. You remember a nice memory, it makes you smile, it changes a bit. It changes your mood a bit, it changes your outlook a bit. You go for a walk, you take in some fresh air, you see, I don't know, if you like animals, let's say. I live in literally in the forests. I'm not, people that know me know me and animals don't go along together. The only animals I like are on a plate and well cooked. But yeah, you see something, a moment of real life. I've got a lot of neighbors that are our age that have children, and I like. I don't know how to phrase this because taken out of context, saying I like watching children sounds really bad, but I like seeing parents interact with their children.
Yeah,
Like these little domestic scenes. They're nice. They're wholesome. They're okay. A mother walking the child down the street, and the child being a little unruly, a little fussy, and the mother says, "Bobby, yeah, if you're nice and you hold mommy's hand when we cross the street, mommy's gonna get you a lolly." Or something. And you see the child go, because show me one child on the face of the planet that you cannot bribe with candy.
that's true. It worked. It still works. Oh man, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. As predicted, I asked you, let's see, 2 out of a possible 30 questions on my piece of paper. I had no worries in my head that this would go well. But I did want to kind of see what the vibe would be, and I can see that if you are willing to be, it'd be great to have you on the show more. Um, See you as a regular face. How do you feel about that?
First of all, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your offer. It's always fun chatting and waxing poetic about anything. I'd be more than honored and happy to come back on the show if you'd have me. If you only went through 2 out of 30 questions, if my math's right, that means we've got like probably 15 more episodes to go through. Yeah, well,
But this is the thing as well. Like I always get prepared for shows, and I've said this before, but I always make sure I'm prepared just in case. But when it's and there's been a few. There's probably like I would say 20 to 30 people I've had on the show over the years where I could probably show up and not have a plan and it'd be all right. And they would we just do it on the fly. And that
This
come
is on you. This is on you, my friend. You picked the chatterbox out of our friend group, and you're wondering why you only got through two questions in
oh,
what
this is not a
2 hours.
complaint, mate. This is exactly what I want, dude. This is like the ideal. This is what you want in a podcast. What you don't want is someone not talking or giving you one word answers. And I believe me, I've had that on the show. Like it's you want this. This is a good space to be in. So I'm very
Mm,
grateful. Massive thank you for being on the show, brother. I love you very much. And I will see you in person real soon. But thank you, and we'll see you on the show again very soon, I'm sure. Thank you to all the listeners of Christian Reeve podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.